So we have incredible friends of the Lit Fest. Many thanks to In Nairobi for amplifying the festival's reach. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here. It's just such good vibes. Thank you to Trademark Suites at Enaki Town, to Somanami, Exquisite Eats, Hard Language Kenya, Jibu Water, Kabejo Catering, Securex, Showrunners, Swizz, who does our sound, and Tilang Ambulance. All right, are you ready for the next session? Hiya. Hiya. Guys, are you ready for the next session? Because let me tell you, we are about to be visited by a legend himself. And I cannot invite him onto this stage with any serious face unless we get a really big warm welcome. So can we let him know that we're very excited? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yes. Much better, thank you. Okay, so the first time that I heard of his work, I'm an 80s baby. The first time I heard of his book, the one book that I think is one of the most famous, it was whispered in hushed tones. It was like, have you read After 4:30? Yeah. How many of you have read it? How many of you have heard of the book? Yes. Did you also hear about it in hushed tones? Yes, right? It was one of those books that when it was first published, you know those books where you put another cover around it and then you pass it on? Because it was hot. And that's just one of his like many pieces of work. So we're getting a real treat at this year's Nairobi Lit Fest. We're doing a retrospective on post-independence Kenyan fiction with the legend himself, David Maillu, who is a prolific Kenyan known for his enthralling novels dating from the 1970s. He has written over 60 books of poetry. Yes, 60. Fiction and nonfiction in Kikamba, English, and Kiswahili. Maillu's sensational novel, After 4:30, which was first published in 1974, was recently reissued and spoke to the realities of the lives of urban housewives, office secretaries, and sex workers. Maillu's bold and provocative style both shocked and revolutionized literature from East Africa, firmly entrenching Maillu's name among the older generation of literary giants. We are so honored and privileged, and hosting this conversation will be the wonderful Nyambura Mutanyi. Please join me in giving them a very warm welcome. Karibu sana.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this session. Asanteni sana for joining us. And before I ask the first question, and of course I should say Karibu sana Prof to this session. We had a chat earlier where Prof told me that he knows this neighborhood from the OG days. I'm talking before the 70s. So I want us, before we ask him all the book questions, to say, give us like 1 or 2 of your favorite memories from this neighborhood, if you will.
One
or two of your favorite memories from this neighborhood, since you said you lived here at some point. So I would love to know what it was like in those days.
You have to repeat that again. The memories, I have a very wide memory on. Okay,
so yeah. top two memories from your time in this neighborhood. Because, for instance, earlier you were saying that the libraries are new. This particular library in its current iteration is new for you and so on. So I'd love to hear 1 or 2 of your favorite memories from your time in this neighborhood.
I think I'm not quite clear about that. Maybe I have not been looking around precisely to be able to say that is the issue.
I mean, you know what? We will circle back to this. All right. So some of us in the audience will be people who work in the literary space. We work in publishing, we are editors, and so on and so forth. And you will be familiar with the concept of self-publishing. And I'm curious to hear from you about your experience with publishing yourself, because you had an era in which you were the one publishing your books. So what insights do you bring to, publishing oneself, publishing one's work, that you can share with people who are now in the 21st century doing the very thing you were doing 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Yeah, the issue is I started writing during colonial times, and the simple story is that publishers, the British publishers here, were not interested in publishing works done by local people. If it was something to do with, religion or Christianity, a little bit of that, but writing wasn't there. And so I remember the earliest stage of my writing that I kept on writing and sending books to publishers, and then and then you keep on getting rejections, and it went on and on and on for a very long time. Until at one stage I thought, well, because I had been at it for quite some time, why would I not publish what I have to, something? And it was during almost my own time, because I hadn't met any other person who had done that. So I was one of the earliest, and but something was also very important that before I started writing, because I've been, my own mind in terms of looking around and what do people actually want to talk about. I still remember at that time I had been living very, very close to where we are here at Jerusalem Estate. And some of the, I went around looking around, sometimes listening to people. What do people like talking about, in public places? And then I discovered the commonest languages, or some of the things that people wanted to talk about. They wanted to talk about money. Money is number one. And they talked about marriage. They talked about God. They talked about politics. They talked about sex. They talked about relations, human relations. And they talked about drinking. There are about 6 subjects. And so at one stage I thought, now, how could I use these subjects to create a story? And being a creative person, I thought, I sat down at one stage, and some of you might have seen, I once published a very small book called Unfit for Human Consumption. And so I sat down, wrote it, and I knew even if I gave it to any publisher, the publisher would not want to publish that. So I composed, the subjects are there, what I have talked about, to capture that. And I remember that was 1973. Most of them were not there, and I did 5,000 copies. I sent it to a distributor, a textbook center. And while I was waiting for that, of course, I didn't advertise. Advertising was one of the things which out of my reach. And the second one, while that was going on, the second one was I did My Dear Bottle. And My Dear Bottle, and some of you who read, who might have come across that, there was a poem I once wrote. It's called Mathare Valley. I want to be very critical on the Kenyatta government to do with that. And that was the time Mathare Valley was the only slum at that time. And so I made quite a story about that. I wrote a poem which I gave to Nation publishers. Nation newspaper, and they looked at it and said, oh, no, 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 if we publish this, Kenyatta is going to come after us. And so I got it back, and at one stage, when I was sitting, I thought, supposing, I use the same material, I create Antrankard, who says many of those things. And so I did that, and I put the entire poem into it. And I wrote that book, My Dear Bottle, which also hit the market very much. In the meantime, the first one, Unfit for Human Consumption, soon was consumed within 7 months, 7 or 8 months. And then I went for print run, and the print run was 20,000 copies. In the meantime, I had the third one, the third book, which has become very famous after 4:30. And what I thought about, what I wanted is to sensitize the girl from the countryside coming to live in urban places, and so I saw the weakness, the weak part of it. We were too, she became either a secretary to somebody who's a graduate from Oxford, and so it was to touch on very sensitive issues when we are talking about prostitution. Why are we talking about who is actually a prostitute? And because it was linked on women, but anyway, a woman cannot do the prostitution without a man. And then I thought that was very unfair. So I developed a story out of that, and that one was published in 1974, which became a hit. By that time, my name had already spread very fast locally here in East Africa. And I started seeing people saying, books don't move like this. And then the first reaction was that the public, of course, because I approached my subject from a different point of view, the way I felt this is what has to be done. Then, of course, when they went to school, to institutions, the problems was there. Now the teachers and young people, because the books became very, very popular, because the way I presented things, this was not what you would see, what was published. And when we talked about literature, if we were talking about Dickens and the others, this was a different type of person. And particularly that when we are talking about after 4:30, it's one of the books I found that in a family, there were 3. You are likely to find the 3 copies, because when the husband was reading this book, there were parts he didn't want his wife to read. And then when she had her copy, there are also parts she didn't want the husband to know. But at the same time, the parents didn't want the children to know certain parts. And when the children were reading that, they didn't want the parents to know. So, but that was not my interest right from the beginning. That was a beginning. Yeah, well, it became myself. And so that started the issue. But before going into that, there was something that I did. I was working for Kenya Broadcasting House, VOK or Kenya, KBC. And when actually I did the first books, and as soon as they started moving, then I thought now I can go and become a publisher. But what I'm saying before that, there was a poem. I wrote. I used to write poetry, also in English, in Kiswahili, and in Kikamba. But the one I wrote in Kikamba appealed to somebody at the broadcasting house and said, "Why don't you come and read your Kikamba poetry?" And then so I got a space at that time Now, I started broadcasting Kikamba poetry. That was actually from 69, 70 to actually 72 or something like. At a time when people didn't, they thought, oh, you are writing poetry in your mother tongue, because we were brought up to think that poetry has to be written in English. And so that one gave me a very good vantage. And when somebody talked about, at one stage, I think you have heard the late Ngugi wa Thiong'o talking about writing in mother tongue. And then that was how actually he at that time he was teaching at the University of Nairobi, and we met at the National theater somewhere there. We talked about that. He was very much interested, and I said, "You keep on writing in your, in English, and then when will your mother or anyone else in your family know what you are writing?" He got very interested about that, and then the next time we met, he was trying the Ngahika and then a poet, a play in Kiswahili, and then we kept on moving, that is the direction. And now from now when I became my own publisher, the interesting part was the British publishers who were saying no to my publishing, to my books were, at me, can we publish something from you? And that is how I actually established myself as an author, as a writer. And if I didn't do that, perhaps it would have taken a very, very long time to do it. And there is there's some little correction I have to make about a statement which was made. And I have published, I am sorry to say that, sometimes I feel embarrassed to say that, I'm the most published author in the continent. I have over 80 publications. And I write for children. For example, for children, stories for children, I have 40 of them, and I have for adults, for all the ages, and so that is the widely part of it. But then, so I had created the center of the controversy, for which I was known, and teachers in schools. Most of them, you would hear, when you walk into a school and children are reading that. Of course, they knew that the teacher is going, and that's so, and then they organized. After reading it, will be me and me and me. There are so many of the children who were beaten. But what was very important is that when the teacher took the book, he went and read it, and from there it went on and on and on. And today, I'm surprised that most of those books which were in institutions, universities, I know my colleagues, some of them who were saying, no, these are not the right books, it's wrong, and then they are now the ones being read in institutions and perhaps discovering what kind of person I was. But this is a very small, general introduction of my participation in writing. Now, but now the story happened at one time. There is a play I wrote. It was called Jesse Christo, which was staged at National Theatre. That was 1969 or something like that. And somehow I now attracted the international community. And from there onwards, and now I became part and parcel of the international community, moving from here anywhere, talking about books, and I became a member of the World Club of Writers. That is a small bit.
Thank you for that succinct introduction to, your work, and this is you've somehow managed to condense over a half century of work and being a literally luminary into what you said. So thank you for that. And you touched on this with your statement about talking to Ngoge about, writing in mother tongue and so on. So I'm curious about the network of influences that you were working in at that point. Like, who was influencing your work, or who continues to influence your work? Who else's work would you say you have influenced? Because I'm sure some of us in the audience would be curious about which writers you think are in conversation with you.
Well, that's a good question. I still remember, because my writing, I was interested in storytelling when I was a child. And I don't know how many of you can imagine what 1951 was, because that is when I went to school, Standard 1. And when you are talking about the books, whether they are written in Kikamba or in what, and what, there were no books for us to read and build me. It's and that is. I built myself as a writer. I still remember sometime in 1959, I was in a technical school, and I remember asking one of my teachers, "Can an African write?" Yeah. And he looked around, he thought about that, and he said, "I think I have heard something." He must have mentioned, he must have been talking about somebody either in Nigeria, I don't know, it could have been Tutuola or somebody like that. And so the question of being influenced by so and so, this didn't come. I had nobody. And an interesting part of it on the schooling part of it was my formal education finished when at the end of Standard 8, which was after doing an exam called the Kenya Preliminary Examination, or KAPE it was called, the colonial ones, because I come from the Kamba community. I'm saying this to give you a little geography of that. In the entire Kamba community, high school was only one, Machakos boys, and the intake was 45 students. And you can imagine in the entire community, in that community, having one school, and then so they took the best. If you passed, but if the school was not there, that was something. So, but I was very much interested in education. So what happened was, as I said, I have to educate myself. So I did. From there, my high school, A-level, university, self-taught. And it is a very, very long way. In fact, I discovered my interest, interest in writing when I was doing my O-level. In the end, we had to sit for Cambridge certificate or something like that. And but one of the tutors, I was studying that using the British Tutorial College, and as now an independent candidate. He used to say, no, you are very good in dialogue or something, but so that the length of myself, teaching myself over the years, I became very, very independent. And so these young people, or the people we were in primary school, who had gone through high school, finally university, we still kept parallel. Yeah, and by the time I finished my high school, as privately doing the A-level, something like that, and then I thought, if I went to university, I would go and study English literature, but I didn't want English literature. I wanted African literature, and where was the African literature? That was a thing. So this is how I began to now create the African literature you're talking about, because the people were not there. So I became a student in my own way, And then the later stage up to university, my PhD is on African literature and political philosophy. So that is the studies I made after 8 years of education. So I'm trying to answer the fact that being a self-taught person, doing things on your own, then you have to think. So I created that. I didn't have influence from anyone and who had been writing in Kikamba or in Kiswahili. But I had just, so I became a scholar by my own reasons, and my researches, personal researches, did drive me actually to in the areas where people were not being published or you didn't talk about that. So I went after what people didn't want to, what was being said, this is a trash or this is, so I became the adventurous person there. It has been a very, very long way, and what I think today, I sit and want to ask myself, could I go through the same system? Perhaps, particularly this one of self-education, it's very, very tough. On your own, you make high school, you home and university, everything, that. But it gave me also a very interesting opportunity to be a very diverse scholar, not only one area, So that one, I don't want to include that in the kind of my brain, but I'm very wide because nobody told me don't read this. I read anything I wanted to read, and so my writing is actually based on that. But I'm very much, I have of course been interested in human behavior. And I remember one stage when I wrote My Dear Bottle, people read and that book and they said, hey, who you to? Then this man must have been a very good drunk, must have been drinking everywhere. And then, but they were so astonished when I said, I am actually a teetotaler. I have never had alcohol in my life. Then they couldn't imagine, how do you do that? Now, the other, I want to answer slightly what you are talking about that now when it comes to the controversy, because my books have been very controversial, mainly because touching on sensitive nerves that people did not want to be touched. And the issue has been, I've been interested in being myself. That is very important. And but I also found out there is now at a later stage when I became a scholar and then I interacted with the others, I began to find a very interesting pattern that people who have gone through the formal education are very good in just, you can be very good in one. If you did philosophy, that's just one. But it tends to put you into a narrow space. And self-education, you actually can go as wide as possible. I discovered that at a later stage when this should be also part of that, when we were doing a manual and equivalent to the Bible or the Quran, addressing now African religion. And by the way, I am president of African Spirituality and in promotion of African religion. And when we were doing that book, because inspired by other scholars who are saying, yeah, African religion has been there, but why has it no book like the Quran or the Bible or something like that? And we thought, I brought on board a group of scholars. Now we are scholars at that stage. I said we have to do it. But then all the others, we were 6 of us, and I was the and the chair or the executive's chair. But they kept on telling me things, well, maybe they were praising me. They say, you know, Mailu, where did you go to? Who educated you? Do you know that you are overeducated or something like that? I didn't want to believe what we are saying, but they began to point out the benefits of self-education. This a system of education which has been has been packaged in Western culture or, you know, package, and the African value or the African cultural background has been very much ignored. And now coming from myself, self-education and seeing things from my own way, not to please anybody, because when I wanted to have education, I didn't want to have education because I wanted to go and work somewhere. I wanted mass education. And so I discovered it's very, very important. Self-education, whether it is in writing or anything, can pay you very well. The simple story is nobody has ever taught me how to write.
And there you have it, folks, the benefits of being an autodidact. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was how you were working across form, you know, poems, plays, novels, and so on. And I'm curious about how that was a thing that was happening quite a lot for people of your generation, that they were writing across form, across age groups also. How does a writer manage to straddle so many different, you know, spaces? How does one go about that?
I think there are claims that writers, you know, you are gifted, and maybe I'm gifted, but there is a lot of that, you know, a lot of work that you have to do. The gift is there, because the story is, as we talk now, I talked about the first book which I published in 1969, that was for children. It's called Kisalu and His Fruit Garden for Children. And today, which is 69 up to today, now that is quite some time. It's over 50 years, 54 or 50, or something like that. Now, I wrote, since I started the publishing, today I can tell you, and I'm not bragging about that, the more I write, the more I discover I'm unable to exhaust myself. I've just published the latest books now, which came out in Twin. One is it's called The Haves and Have Not, and the second one is Dr. Kavirondo. These actually came out, they were published 2 weeks ago. Those I wrote last year, and so every time, if I had actually to publish, if I had a publisher to publish what I have written, then people would be shocked. I don't have to mention that, because, and what I'm trying to say, maybe this is the gifty part of it. I'm writing, and I cannot exhaust myself. And I have been testing myself and looking at a book, the one I mentioned, for example, Unfit for Human Consumption, along with another one which I have written, is The Haves and Have Not. I want to see studying the mind development. It's also interesting to, I've been interested in myself to see what are the issues which are actually, you know, impressing my mind at the moment. And so at the same time, I've been trying to study myself, and the body, or the human body, is very complex. You may believe that you know yourself, but until you have done a thorough research to find yourself, well, you will never know yourself until maybe when you have been buried, I don't know, maybe the whole structure goes there. But we have, the issue is the colonial systems under which we have been brought up. during colonial times, whether it was in West Africa or where, the colonials did their own parts with their own interest, but what they did was they wanted to stop you from thinking. Don't think. Yeah, we will think for you. And with the bringing on board Christianity or Islam, or let the Bible or the Quran think for you, and that has actually killed a lot of creativity in us. We are not thinking because it's only maybe now people are beginning to say, oh, I can do it. Because at the time I started writing, I was fighting against the people who are saying, oh, you can't write, you can't publish, this cannot be done, all this, you can't. I said, oh, okay, that's for you, let me do it. And this is very good for people, young people who also want to be writers. And for one thing, and that should be there, it is a lifetime commitment. Don't write just one book and think, yeah, that is enough. Because the more you write, the more you actually discover yourself, the more you understand your community. And that is a lifetime. And people who think that, I want to be a writer very quickly and become very wealthy, and well, you may be surprised in your own life. You could keep on writing throughout your life and remain poor. Or you could write at, you never know, and strike something that you become a millionaire, you become anything. So, but the satisfaction, the fact that you have talked to yourself, and these books will live beyond you. Chinua Achebe died some time ago, and Ngugi and the others, but these people are there. If you make a mistake, if it were possible, and you went to Britain and said, we are coming to recover or to steal Shakespeare, English people will fight, will use anything they have to make sure their Shakespeare remains theirs. And this is telling the story about what is writing. The writing lives beyond you. You are the spirit of the community, is the spirit of yourself. And if you don't say it, nobody can say it, because when you die, we don't know who you are, but writing is, you are trying to understand yourself. I don't know whether I've answered a little bit indirectly what you're asking.
I mean, there are lots of gems in there. And Alea is signaling at me that we need to leave soon. So I'll ask you for a really short list of the books that we should reach for if we are hoping to read those early post-independence Kenyan writers. And please feel free to include your own in the list.
Well, I've been asked that question in so many places, and I'm a creature that I may disappoint you if I tell you go and read so and so, but in a very small fraction part of it. One of my best leading writers is Tolstoy. And but of course there are others you have read. I'm very diverse in that. And but of course reading what other writers have written, whether it's Chinua Achebe, whether Ngugi, it is part and parcel of developing your mind. So I do not, and I cannot say of what I have written that I think you should go and read the haves and have not more than after 4:30. Those are my children, and I don't know. So I'm very poor in trying to recommend you have to go and read that and that and then, because each book is an entity, it's in an individual spirit. It says something different, and now one of the I have just to mention one thing. We have a problem. We think we are writers. We think we are independent. I don't think so. Until we have become independent. Now it is so. When I was being brought to this place, I was asking, is there a library place in Eastlands? Because this is to have libraries is one of the rare things in Kenya, you know. And you talk about, for example, in Ukambani, my area, and other places, there are no libraries there. But what they are having in, left and right, it's creation of and churches. Churches everywhere, here, church here, and then drinking places, a bar here, another one, and we are drinking, sinking, we are killing ourselves. If you don't read as a nation, and the world is reading, then we are going down, and we are killing our cultural values. And so to have, by now, we should have as many bookshops, as many libraries as possible. But unfortunately, we have been led by semi-literate governments, and that is the story. The problem is not with the present government. The problem started from day one, because we never addressed, when we talk about reading culture, at the time I was writing my books, I was hearing, people don't read, Africans don't read, or something like that. And then I surprised them when I read and to hear, these books, people are reading. So the people are there, the readers are there, but you have to give them books which they can read, which talk their language. And so this issue of having no libraries in this country, and for goodness sake, we have 47 counties, and go and ask them, do you have a library? No, but they, with this, I don't know. I can be very, very naughty and say, this is shit. Yeah. So where are we going? The churches in Eastlands here, go and looking around, you'll be surprised how many there are there. And drinking places, where are we going? And when you are writing, you write, people, the reading culture has to be developed, and this is a national issue. And by the way, that may be giving me an opportunity to tell you that what I didn't want to say, that I'm also a presidential candidate. And the issue is to address what we are talking about, because culturally, and let me go to the religion part of it. I'm not. You can call me anything one may want to call, but the issue is, God has always been in Africa since the beginning of, human race. And people have always been talking to their God, communication, everything. So God has never left or taken a leave so that we would have another religion brought and you are told this one is going to stand by. No. But then when the other foreign religions came, and I know many of you are in that, they begin to behave as if Africa did not know God. That is the bad part of it. And religion, and when we talk about religion and when we talk about culture, we are talking about two fundamental things. The culture of the people, which is the base of their religion, is their religion. The culture of the people is their religion. So we are, in so many places, although we may brag and we are there, we are bastards because the religion is, we are not proud of our own religions. Maybe the skin, I don't know, why am I black or something like that. And these are the issues that I have been trying to address in trying to write. And the issue why I also got involved in the religion part of it, not because I would be anything else. I was the first person in my family to go to church, but when I went to church because as a little boy, we used to hear the story that when come the end of the world, you'll be thrown into hell where where there is fire and you keep on burning throughout, you never die. That horrified me as a child and drove me, of course, to go to church and be saved. I got saved, but at a later stage, you begin to know this is a different story. So the African problem, writing is just an expression fortunately, I'm gifted enough I'm gifted in all arts. If I can't write, I can sing, and I can write, I can paint. All that, those are gifts, but the African problem has to be seriously addressed, and we are playing.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if I may be so bold as to give a book recommendation, because the writer here has said you need to go and read, I would suggest that you pick up No Place Like Home in a New City by Bettina Ngweno, which is a great history of Nairobi. And for all of you who every so often are wondering, why is my neighborhood flooding? The book will answer the question. It will also tell you so much about this neighborhood, this particular neighborhood that we are in, which, as some of you may know, is historically the oldest inhabited, like, African part of the city, continuously inhabited by, when I say African, I mean in the colonial sense, as in black people. So again, the title is No Place Like Home in a New City by Bettina Ngweno, and it's available as a free EPUB, so you'll not be stealing from the university press when you get it like that.
Now, maybe since you seem to be pressing to say that,
No, we can each come and get personal recommendations.
I would, because I wrote this book I'm calling The Haves and Have Not, has been a study case. I've been studying to see what went wrong with this country. Where did the rains start beating us? So if you want me to recommend myself, I feel embarrassed, then then read The Haves and Have Not.
All right, and you see, we managed to extract a book recommendation. Thank you all so much for being such a great audience. Thank you so much, Mwalimu, for being a great speaker. And please enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much.
And good people, thank you very much for listening to me. It is an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mwalimu, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Truly, we got an education today, didn't we? And if I may ask you to stand for a photo, we must record this moment. Thank you, Nyambura. And if you can give Mwalimu and Nyambura your biggest smile. Make them just laugh. There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I have just come to learn that there is a staged reading of After 4:30 happening tonight and into next week at the Alliance Française. So please make sure to catch it. And please buy the book and get your book signed, because isn't that one of the most wonderful things about literature festivals? So now, the other thing I just wanted to mention, since this is co-presented with Book Bank, Mwalimu mentioned libraries. And I remember last year at Nairobi Lit Fest, there was a presentation of some research that Book Bank had done documenting the libraries around the country, and it was really just incredible. So you can check that out on the website. How you all feeling? Yeah, good? I hope you're not fading yet. Are you fading? This next session is such a treat. I mean, I think it's time for a little bit of a different